Picture this: December 2nd, 1993, Medellín, Colombia. A middle-aged man is running across red-tiled rooftops in a residential neighborhood. He's barefoot, wearing jeans and a blue shirt. Behind him, Colombian Special Forces soldiers are closing in. Helicopters circle overhead. Gunfire echoes through the streets. The man reaches the edge of a roof. There's nowhere left to run. He pulls out a pistol. More gunshots. The man falls, bleeding from his torso and head. He's dead. His name is Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, the most powerful, most violent, most wealthy drug lord in history. At his peak, he was worth over $30 billion. He controlled 80% of the global cocaine trade. He smuggled 15 tons of cocaine into the United States every single day. He made so much money that he spent $2,500 per month just on rubber bands to wrap cash. But Pablo Escobar wasn't just a drug dealer. He was a terrorist. He bombed government buildings. He assassinated presidential candidates, judges, journalists, police officers. He blew up a passenger plane, killing 110 innocent people. He declared war on the Colombian government, and for years he won. This is the story of Pablo Escobar, the man who became more powerful than a government, who turned Medellín into a war zone, who built a drug empire worth billions while murdering thousands, and the story of how he was finally hunted down and killed on that rooftop in 1993. Let me take you through the rise and fall of the world's most notorious drug kingpin. Pablo Escobar was born December 1st, 1949, in Rio Negro, Colombia, a small town near Medellín. His family was poor but not destitute. His father was a farmer. His mother was a school teacher. Pablo grew up in Medellín, a city in the mountains of northwest Colombia. From an early age, Pablo was ambitious. He told his family and friends he would be rich and famous. He didn't care how. He just knew he wouldn't stay poor. As a teenager, Pablo turned to crime. Small-time stuff at first, stealing gravestones, sanding off the names, and reselling them. Then stealing cars. Then petty theft. By his early 20s, Pablo was involved in kidnapping, targeting wealthy businessmen, and demanding ransom. But Pablo's real opportunity came in the 1970s. Cocaine. Cocaine had been around for decades, but in the 1970s, demand exploded in the United States. Americans wanted cocaine, lots of it, and Colombia was perfectly positioned to supply it. The coca plant grew in South America. Colombian criminals could buy coca paste from Peru and Bolivia, process it into cocaine in Colombia, and smuggle it into the U.S. Pablo Escobar saw the opportunity. He started small, working as a smuggler for other traffickers. But he was smart, ruthless, and willing to take risks. He realized the real money wasn't in smuggling for someone else. It was in controlling the entire operation from production to distribution. By the late 1970s, Pablo had built his own organization, the Medellín Cartel. He partnered with other traffickers, Jorge Ochoa, Carlos Lader, and José Rodríguez Gacha, and together they created the most powerful drug trafficking organization in history. Here's how it worked. The Medellín Cartel bought coca paste from producers in Peru and Bolivia. They transported it to labs in Colombia, where chemists processed it into pure cocaine. Then they smuggled the cocaine into the United States using planes, boats, and later, submarines. Once in the U.S., the cocaine was distributed to dealers across the country. The scale was staggering. At its peak, the Medellín Cartel smuggled 15 tons of cocaine into the United States every single day. That's 15,000 kilograms, every day. And the profits were unimaginable. Cocaine cost about $1,000 per kilogram to produce in Colombia. It sold for $60,000 per kilogram in the U.S. Do the math: 15 tons per day at a $59,000 profit per kilo. That's over $800 million in profit, every day. Pablo Escobar personally made an estimated $420 million per week. That's $22 billion per year. By the late 1980s, Forbes magazine listed Pablo Escobar as the seventh-richest man in the world, worth over $30 billion. He made so much money that storing it became a problem. Pablo had so much cash that 10% of it was eaten by rats every year. He stored millions in the walls of his houses, buried it underground, and even sank it in lakes and rivers. He spent $2,500 per month just on rubber bands to wrap the bills. But with that much money and power came violence, lots of violence. Pablo Escobar's philosophy was simple: plata o plomo, silver or lead, bribe or bullet. You either accepted his money and worked for him, or you got killed. And Pablo killed constantly. Judges who wouldn't take bribes, assassinated; police officers investigating him, killed; journalists writing about him, murdered; politicians opposing him, bombed. Pablo didn't just kill individuals, he killed en masse. He pioneered the use of car bombs, motorcycle assassins, and terror attacks to eliminate his enemies and intimidate the government. Some of his most horrific acts include bombing the DS building, Colombia's equivalent of the FBI, in 1989. A truck loaded with 500 kilograms of explosives detonated outside the building, killing 52 people and injuring over 1,000. Many victims were civilians passing by. He bombed the Avianca Flight 203, a commercial passenger plane, in 1989. Pablo's men planted a bomb on the plane targeting a presidential candidate, Cesar Gaviria, who Pablo wanted dead, but Gaviria wasn't on the flight. The bomb exploded mid-air, killing all 107 people on board, plus 3 on the ground, 110 innocent people murdered in an assassination attempt that failed. He assassinated 3 presidential candidates in the late 1980s. Luis Carlos Galan, a leading candidate who opposed the cartels, was gunned down at a campaign rally in 1989. Bernardo Jaramillo and Carlos Pizarro, 2 other candidates, were also murdered on Pablo's orders. He killed over 600 police officers. Pablo declared war on the Colombian police, offering bounties for dead cops, $1,000 for every police officer killed. Hundreds of young men in Medellín's slums took him up on the offer. Police were gunned down in the streets daily. Medellín became the most dangerous city in the world. He killed judges, prosecutors, and government officials. Anyone who tried to prosecute him or extradite him to the United States was targeted. Entire families were wiped out. Witnesses were murdered. The Colombian justice system nearly collapsed under the terror. By the late 1980s, Pablo Escobar had killed an estimated 4,000 people. Some estimates go as high as 7,000. His violence was so extreme that Colombia became synonymous with drug violence and terror. But Pablo wasn't just a terrorist, he was also, bizarrely, a hero to many poor Colombians. Pablo understood that to survive, he needed public support, so he became a Robin Hood figure in Medellín. He built housing for the poor, entire neighborhoods called Barrio Pablo Escobar. He built soccer fields, schools, and hospitals. He handed out cash to families in the slums. He sponsored youth soccer teams. To many poor people in Medellín, Pablo Escobar wasn't a drug lord. He was a benefactor, a man who gave them homes and opportunities when the government didn't. They loved him. They protected him. They warned him when police were coming. In 1982, Pablo even ran for political office. He was elected as an alternate member of Colombia's Congress. He used his position to gain political immunity and block extradition laws, but his political career was short-lived. Journalists exposed his criminal past, and he was forced to resign in disgrace. Still, Pablo's popularity in the slums remained. When he walked through poor neighborhoods, people cheered. Children ran up to him. He was a folk hero. But to the Colombian government, the United States, and his victims, Pablo Escobar was a monster. And by the late 1980s, both governments were determined to bring him down. The Colombian government, under pressure from the United States, launched a massive manhunt for Pablo Escobar. They created a special police unit, the Search Block, tasked with hunting him down. The U.S. provided intelligence, funding, and training. The DEA, CIA, and U.S. military advisors joined the hunt. Pablo responded with more terror, more bombings, more assassinations. He demanded that the Colombian government abolish extradition to the United States. He knew if he was extradited to the U.S., he'd spend life in prison. In Colombia, with his money and influence, he could buy his way out. So he waged war to prevent extradition. The violence reached a peak in 1989 and 1990. Bombings almost daily, hundreds dead. Medellín was a war zone. Finally, in 1991, the Colombian government made a deal with Pablo. They agreed to abolish extradition and allow him to surrender to a prison of his own design. Pablo agreed. He turned himself in and was imprisoned in La Catedral, the cathedral, a luxurious prison he built himself on a hill overlooking Medellín. La Catedral was a joke. It had a soccer field, a bar, a jacuzzi, and a disco. Pablo continued running his drug empire from prison. He held meetings, ordered hits, and lived in luxury. Guards were bribed. The prison was basically a private club. But then Pablo made a mistake. In 1992, he tortured and killed 2 of his associates inside the prison. The Colombian government realized they'd been made fools of. They decided to transfer Pablo to a real prison. Pablo found out about the plan. On July 22, 1992, he escaped La Catedral before authorities could transfer him. He simply walked out, and the manhunt resumed. For the next 16 months, Pablo Escobar was a fugitive. He moved constantly, hiding in safe houses across Medellín and Colombia. The Search Block hunted him relentlessly. The U.S. provided electronic surveillance technology to track his phone calls. a vigilante group called Los Papes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar began hunting him too, killing his associates and bombing his properties. Los Papes was brutal. They murdered Pablo's lawyers, accountants and family members. They burned his ranches and homes. Some believe Los Papes was secretly supported by the search bloc and the Colombian government. Pablo's empire crumbled. His money dried up as assets were seized. His allies were killed or arrested. His family fled to Germany, then Argentina, seeking asylum. Pablo was isolated, paranoid and desperate. By late 1993, the search bloc was closing in. They'd narrowed Pablo's location to a neighborhood in Medellín. They monitored his phone calls and waited for him to slip up. On December 2, 1993, Pablo made a phone call to his son Juan Pablo. It lasted just long enough for authorities to triangulate his location, a safe house on a residential street in Medellín. The search bloc moved in. Dozens of soldiers surrounded the house. Pablo realized they were there. He grabbed a pistol and ran to the roof with his bodyguard. They tried to escape across the rooftops. Gunfire erupted. Pablo's bodyguard was shot and killed. Pablo kept running barefoot across the red tiles. He reached the edge of a roof. Soldiers were everywhere. He turned and fired his pistol. The soldiers fired back. Pablo was hit multiple times, torso, leg, and head. He collapsed on the roof, bleeding. Within minutes, he was dead. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, 44 years old, was dead. The most powerful drug lord in history, killed on a rooftop in his hometown. Photos of Pablo's body were broadcast worldwide. His corpse, bloodied and lifeless, lying on the rooftop. For many it was justice. For others, it was the end of an era. But Pablo's death didn't end the drug trade. Other cartels, the Cali cartel, the Norte del Valle cartel, took over. Today cocaine production in Colombia is higher than it was in Pablo's time. The violence continues. The drug war goes on. Pablo Escobar's legacy is complicated. He killed thousands. He terrorized a nation. He corrupted governments and destroyed countless lives through addiction and violence. But he also built homes for the poor. He gave money to communities the government ignored. To some he's a villain. To others he's a folk hero. His family fled Colombia after his death. His wife Maria Victoria Henao and his children, Juan Pablo and Manuela, went into hiding. Juan Pablo changed his name to Sebastián Marroquín and eventually became an architect and author. He spent years apologizing to his father's victims and trying to distance himself from Pablo's crimes. Manuela, Pablo's daughter, has lived in obscurity. She's traumatized by her childhood, reportedly suffering from depression and PTSD. Pablo's properties were seized or destroyed. His zoo, yes, he had a private zoo with elephants, hippos and exotic animals, was abandoned. The hippos escaped into the Colombian jungle and have since bred. Today there are over 100 wild hippos in Colombia, descendants of Pablo's pets. They're an ecological disaster, but also a bizarre living reminder of his excess. Pablo's story has been told in countless books, documentaries and TV shows. Netflix's Narcos made him a global pop culture figure. His face is on t-shirts. Tourists visit his grave and his former properties. He's been romanticized, mythologized, and turned into entertainment. But the victims, the thousands he killed, the families destroyed, the communities terrorized, shouldn't be forgotten. Pablo Escobar wasn't an anti-hero. He was a mass murderer who built an empire on violence and death. $30 billion, 15 tons of cocaine per day, 4,000 to 7,000 people murdered, a government bombed, a passenger plane destroyed, a nation held hostage by terror. And it all ended on a rooftop in Medellín, December 2, 1993. Pablo Escobar, barefoot and bleeding, dead at 44. The king of cocaine, the narco-terrorist, the man who declared war on a country, and lost.